Okay, this is our second lecture on muscle identification. I'm going to go over the muscles that you have to know on the for lab exams and quizzes. Um, I'll describe the muscle, its actions, and its origin and insertion. I want to remind you, obviously, I have a meeting on Friday, and you're listening to the lecture materials online. There are also review materials, including the essay questions online. If you have lab on Friday, the handouts are there for you, those assignments, and they are due on Friday. So be sure to go in the lab and complete that stuff there. Elizabeth will be in there to answer any questions, to hand back the exam. Materials are out and instructions are on the board. I also want to remind you next week, Wednesday, we will have the exam on chapters 5, 6, parts of chapter 9, and chapter 10. Same format as exam 1 with an emphasis on physiology. Okay, last time I went over functions of muscles and muscle characteristics. Muscles can contract to produce force. They are excitable by nerve cells or electrical stimulation. They are stretchy. You can extend them as well, and they are elastic. I also talked about muscles work in groups. Although muscles, we talked about it, each muscle is an organ, they tend to work together. You have agonists that work together to produce a movement. A prime mover provides the most force, but synergists have the same or just slightly different action. Whenever muscles contract, also other muscles need to stabilize the skeleton. And so you have, when agonists work, you also have fixators that are going to stabilize joints around that, so like the shoulder doesn't flop when you want to really move the elbow. And then we also have muscles that are antagonists that have the opposite actions. They're needed to put that joint back in the original position. Okay, for us, we're going to focus on three things: the origin, which is the attachment area that moves less, the insertion, the area that moves more, and then the action. What does it do at the site of the joint? Okay, I think I went through the muscles of the head and neck pretty well. I'm going to kind of go through muscles of the arm and chest, things like that. Last time I talked about muscles that move the head and neck, but there are some muscles that move the upper arm. Here you can see on the right side there, the deltoid. The deltoid is a large triangular muscle that covers the shoulder. It abducts the humerus, so causes the arm to move away from the midline of the body. It inserts on the humerus. And so it's coming from the scapula and from the clavicle. All right, here you can also see the Pectoralis Major. This flexes and adducts the humerus. It's going from the sternum and fascia on the ribs to again to the humerus, and it's going to bring that humerus forward. It's like when you do a push-up, that's the pectoralis that does that, and it's moving the arm towards the midline. What else can you see here? Okay, I think that's good. We can also see the Serratus Anterior here. The Serratus Anterior goes to the scapula. It's an important muscle for stabilizing the scapula. It tends to hold it in place, maybe move it a little bit anteriorly and lower it down. Here you see some of the deep heads of the Biceps Brachia, a little bit underneath the deltoid, and so that's a muscle that's going to flex the elbow. I can't remember if I showed this last time or not. This shows the muscles on the back of the neck. It's a posterior view. Here the trapezius is an important muscle in that it's going from the scapula and the fascia on the thoracic and cervical vertebrae to the back of the neck. The trapezius can raise the scapula, or it can help extend the neck and pull the head back, and so is important that way. The Splenius Capitus you can see here. Splenius Capitus, again, going from cervical vertebrae to the back of the head. This is going to extend the head backwards, and it's just showing it on one side because it's a deeper muscle. It's underneath the trapezius, but it's actually on both sides. And when one of these contracts, it can rotate the head. So it kind of does the opposite of the sternocleidomastoid. Okay, so we can see those there. Let's see. Let's go. Okay, yeah, here we can see the anterior surface of the arm and the lateral surface of the arm. So again, I showed you the biceps brachia. We've seen that in several things. The brachialis and the brachioradialis. Okay, these are all flexors of the elbow. The biceps brachia comes from the scapula and goes to the humerus. The brachioradialis is going to go from the humerus to the radialis, and will again flex. And then the brachialis is another one I think you have to know that also flexes the elbow, and I believe that's also going from the humerus. In this case, I think it's going to the ulna. All right, and then on the lateral view, you can see the triceps brachia. The triceps brachia is going to be an extender of the elbow, and that's important. It has the opposite action as the biceps brachia, and these are going to insert on fascia and on the olecranon process of the elbow. I'm not going to have you know any of the muscles on the forearm, although the brachialis is a bit on there as well. Okay. Then next, a group of muscles that are on the abdominal wall. Okay, going right down the center. On the left there, it's shown with the sheath removed. Normally there's a fibrous sheath there. On the left, you see the bands that divide the rectus abdominis. It goes straight down the midline on either side of the midline. The rectus abdominis is going to go to the pubis, coming from the ribs and lower part of the sternum, and it flexes the spine like when we do a sit-up. And then on the lateral side of the rectus abdominis, you'll see on one side you'll see the external oblique, okay, with its fibers running down towards the midline. And on the other side, you'll see the internal abdominal oblique with its fibers running up toward the midline. These muscles are lateral, and they're inserting on fascia that's going to attach to the pelvis. And these muscles are going to also flex the spine, but add a twisting motion. And underneath them is another muscle called the transverse abdominis. And this really doesn't flex the spine, but it acts with all these three other abdominal muscles to compress the abdomen. And so this is like if you're blowing up the balloon, you'll compress your abdomen really hard to expel the last bit of air. And so the arrangement of these guys is kind of hard to see, or hard to think about when you just see this front view. But when you look at a superior cross section, the rectus abdominis is in two bands on either side of the midline, and it runs down the midline. The other abdominal muscles are lateral of the rectus abdominis, and they form the abdominal wall. Okay. I don't really have a good picture of the latissimus dorsi. I wonder if, I don't have it. So we'll go back down here. Okay. Then the last major group of muscles are muscles that are on the thigh and leg. From the anterior view, which are seen here, you can see a bunch of these muscles. The largest group of these is called the Quadriceps Femoris, and it's divided into four parts. The rectus femoris, okay, which you can kind of see going down the midline, that goes to a tendon, the patellar tendon, that goes right to the patella by the kneecap. Then Just above the kneecap on either side of that tendon are two vastus muscles, the vastus medialis and the vastus lateralis. These are also part of the quadriceps femoris. And then there's a vastus intermedius that's underneath the rectus femoris. And all four of these form the quadriceps femoris. They all insert by this patellar tendon and patellar ligament. And what they do is extend the knee. So like when you're kicking a football, these muscles contract to extend the knee. So it's a big group of muscles that are right on the front of the thigh. Then there are a bunch of other muscles that are going to move the upper thigh. There are a group called the adductors, which include the pectineus, adductor longus, and gracilis. These three muscles on the inside all adduct the thigh, so they're the adductors that move it towards the thigh, towards the midline when the thigh gets away. As a group, these are sometimes called the groin muscles. When they talk about someone having a groin injury in sports or injured a groin muscle, it is one of these three muscles. It makes it hard to bring that leg in, so it's very, very difficult to turn. Then there are some muscles here that are abductors that pull the leg away from the midline. These include this muscle, the sartorius, which is a strap-like muscle that goes from the inside of the thigh here, runs across and inserts on the anterior superior spine of the iliac. That pulls the leg away. Another muscle that helps that is called the tensor fasciae, which is coming from near the same place, and it's inserting on fascia on the outside of the knee. And so these are the two main abductors. There's another one that's seen from the posterior, the gluteus medius. And so you can sometimes see that. You can just catch a little bit of these muscles, this Psoas major and Iliacus. Normally you can't see the top part of this because it's hidden by the abdomen. These are going to the inner surface of the pelvis of the ilium, and they're inserting on the femur. These are the major muscles that extend the thigh, like when we're walking. Excuse me, is it flex or extend? Oh, no, I'll say that these are flexors. They're flexing the thigh. And so they bring it forward when we're walking. So very, very important muscles. Okay, so these are major groups of muscles, and you can see them. Then kind of the back of the thigh is the gluteus maximus, which extends the femur. It goes from the sacrum and a little bit of the rear part of the ilium, and it's going to the greater trochanter of the femur, and it extends the thigh. So it's when we're sitting and want to stand up, this is the muscle that does it. And then just above this is the gluteus medius. This is another abductor. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Here's just another view of the muscles that are the groin muscles, the adductors. You don't have to know all of these. You're going to have to know the adductor longus and the adductor magnus. Those are the two main ones that we're going to know. They are the largest ones there. And so this is an anterior view with the superficial muscles, the quadratus femoris removed, quadriceps femoris removed. Okay, here's a posterior view of the last major group of muscles here of the leg. These are the semitendinosus, the semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. These are the muscles that flex the knee. As a group, these are called the hamstrings. These are really large muscles involved in running. They're going from the ischial tuberosity to the back of the knee, on the tibia and a little bit of the fibula. That's where they're inserting. Very, very powerful. Really well muscled athletes can contract these muscles so hard that they'll actually rip the tendons. And so that's what's happened when there's a pulled hamstring. And then that tendon has to rest while it needs to repair itself. Okay. And then there are 3 more muscles that we're going to know on the lower leg. These are the muscles that do plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. The 2 muscles that do plantar flexion are the gastrocnemius and the soleus. These are inserting by the Achilles tendon on the calcaneus, and they come from fascia on the back of the tibia. And when they contract, they pull on that Achilles tendon, and then that makes you stand on your tiptoes. That's plantar flexion. Okay. Then there's a bunch of muscles together that do dorsiflexion. You only have to know one of them, and that's the major one, the tibialis anterior, going from the tibia, attaching by tendons onto the tops of the toes, particularly the big toe there. Okay, so we'll go over all of these muscles next week in the lab. There's good illustrations of most of them in your textbook, and I'll have some worksheets for us to work on them. And then next week in the lab, we'll try and look at as many of these muscles as we can in the cadaver. So that's what's coming up.